In Togo, a 74-year-old politician with critical health issues has been jailed as part of a crackdown on dissent. It comes after Togo's parliament passed a bill proposing huge changes to the political system. It then delayed elections due this month. 5 opposition lawmakers were jailed for campaigning against the reforms. Under the bill, the President of Togo would become a symbolic position selected by Parliament rather than being directly elected, meaning term limits could be bypassed. Well, for more on this, I'm joined in the studio by Aigbe. He's a member of the West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network. Austin, thank you so much for joining us today. We've seen a public outcry over these reforms in Togo, a delay to elections, the possibility of the president being able to rule indefinitely, and now opposition politicians being arrested. What is happening?
The question is very important to ask. What is happening? We just came out from Senegal with almost the kind of scenario where Parliament passed a change in a way to shift elections up to December the 15th. But the people rose against that proposal, and then today we now have one of the best elections in West Africa. So Togo just popped up as if it was a baton, it was a race in the way that Senegal is done. We just take it over to Togo. I'm truly worried that just one individual, maybe one family, haven't ruled this nation for more than 2 decades. And the question being asked is, your longevity in that position has not resulted to any meaningful advancement for a country. People will usually argue that serving longer in a position, particularly presidency, will amount to certain changes. The news you read about Rwanda is a typical example of some long-term president who has transformed their country, or people make all manner of situations about Singapore and make statements around the global community. But here you are in Togo and elsewhere in West Africa and Africa. The perpetuality in power has not impacted on the democratic culture. It is important that ECOWAS does quickly step up, because as we speak, ECOWAS seems to be silent, almost justifying the kind of scenario that does ECOWAS truly support the changes, even though that the change in the constitution is on standby because it's been referred back. We don't know what happened next.
So we know there's been this outrage from opposition politicians. We've seen a lot of tension. We've also seen calls for mass protests. But as you referenced there, this isn't Senegal. We haven't seen the sort of reaction there. Just how is the public taking all this in Togo?
There's been some couple of protests already ongoing, but the mass protest is between 11, 12, and 13 or something like that this week. And that call is essentially to push back that demand. And opposition political parties, civil society, particularly civil society, leading that kind of intervention is to say no to this form of change. If you must even change this architecture, the ECOWAS protocol does not support you at this material time. You are changing and you are benefiting from the change. ECOWAS protocol says when you make those changes, you shouldn't benefit from it. It means that you are being democratic. But in this case, it is clear that the president of the country, Togo president, did push the kind of amendment through the parliament, essentially withdrawing himself to be seen. The same thing, I'm curious to use the word, the same thing Macky Sall did. Push the ball to the parliament, let parliament make decision, then you come back to you, and then you try to play the good guy. What he has done now, because of the conference of the bishop, who has said, no, please, you need to revisit. This process must be inclusive, like you just like you mentioned. Opposition parties, opposition political opponents, particularly dissident voices, are being cracked down on, arrested. Imagine that older fellow who has been arrested. Countless number of civil society officials, members of Wadamos particularly, have been targeted in all of these shenanigans.
And you said there about the opposition politicians being arrested, but in Togo, there isn't actually that big of an opposition. We know that they're poorly represented in parliament. They boycotted the last election. And as you said, the current president, he took over from his father in 2005. His father ruled the country with an iron fist for about 38 years, I believe. Is this a case of the apple simply just not falling far from the tree?
So let me start from the opposition party. There are a number of opposition folks in that country. But again, because of...
But they're not in parliament.
Yeah, they are not in parliament, yes. Because, like you said, they boycotted the last election because of the way the election was conducted.
Yeah.
If you look at statistically now, Afrobarometer's data shows that 61% of Togolese wants free, fair elections. In fact, the call for election, they no longer have confidence in the election, in the electoral process of Togo because of the way the elections are conducted. So it's even better not to participate in elections. So, but now changing the constitution in a way that just hand over the election of a president to the parliament, it's taking away the people's power. That's literally taking away the people's power. For the president, and of course, ruling from where his father stopped, he is just being technical, maybe as a younger folk, but again, he has not demonstrated the sincerity and the democratic culture that is now embedded in the ECOWAS region. I mean, whether you like it or not, ECOWAS is a pride of Africa in terms of democracy. But again, the next question will be, we've had the military regime, but that's not it. But ECOWAS tend to be the strongest in terms of democratic consolidation. And Togo does have the privilege of running an election, even though we know that you just want to have an election. That's this kind of case you have somewhere like in Russia. That, are you looking for election? Yes, election will hold. But you know that this election will produce the same character, the same individuals. And see what happened. Even members of parliament who opposed that change have been arrested. And the question is, who is arresting these individuals?
And that is the question, and I hope we will have you back soon so that we can get the answer to that question. But for the moment, Austin Aigbe from the West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network, thank you so much for joining us here on Arise.